Good evening, everyone, and welcome to A Night with the Candidates, a political forum produced by the Times Leader and King's College. My name is Doug Olson, and I'm the publisher of the Times Leader. On behalf of all my colleagues, we appreciate your participation in what should be an informative evening. Before we begin, I'd like to thank King's College for their partnership in producing tonight's event with us. I'd also like to thank the candidates, Tony George and Frank Sorick, for agreeing to participate. We at the Times Leader believe that an informed public makes the best voters, which ultimately leads to the best governance for our city. In that spirit, we're mindful of the decisions that voters will be faced with on November 3rd, and we're hopeful that tonight's event will go a long way to informing all of us on the candidates' positions on various issues. Our moderator this evening is Executive Editor of the Times Leader, George Spohr. George is going to go over a few ground rules, and then we'll hear from the candidates. Thank you all for being here this evening. We appreciate it. George?
To echo Doug, I want to thank the candidates for joining us tonight, and I also would like to thank King's College for hosting us this evening. With the help of our readers, the Times Leader has crafted 15 questions that we'll be asking the candidates tonight. Our ground rules are very simple. We'll alternate questions between the candidates. The first question will go to Mr. Sorick, and that was determined by a coin toss earlier this evening. He will have 3 minutes to answer that first question, and then Mr. George will have 2 minutes to respond. After that, we'll alternate in that fashion until the last question has been asked. The last question we're going to ask is simple. We're going to ask the candidates to explain to us why they should be the next mayor of Wilkes-Barre. They'll each have 3 minutes to respond to that question. Dottie Martin, our managing editor, will keep us all in check as her role is our timekeeper tonight. We're all here in the spirit of learning and information. As such, I'd like to ask the audience to refrain from making any comments until after the forum has completed. If everyone understands the process, I'll dive right in. Mr. Sorick, if Mayor Leighton's budget proposal contains a tax increase, will you revise it so that it doesn't contain a tax increase?
It does not contain a tax increase, but I will be revising the mayor's budget anyway.
In what way will you be revising it?
There's several issues. As I've stated all along, the mayor's salary is astronomically high for the area. I believe that needs to be adjusted, as well as I'm not a firm believer in elected officials receiving a benefits package. So as your elected mayor, I will not be taking a benefits package that is paid for by the taxpayers. I will be paying for that myself. So in a sense, I will be diverting the savings back to needed departments like the police department or fire department or DPW.
Thank you. Mr. George, can you reply?
I would revise the budget also, but because some of the projections I believe are a little high, and I think they're not realistic, and they won't meet the values they're determining. I'd probably downplay those. And as far as the police department, decreasing your salary and the council salaries not going to make much of a difference. For one officer, it's probably $100,000 to send to training, uniform, and his salary. So, you know, there'll be some changes in the budget, but first we have to see what the projected costs are, where we stand right now, because I don't know where we stand right now. If we met the projections this year or not, depends on where we go next year. I have to wait till we get all the figures in.
Okay. Next question is for you, Mr. George. If you become mayor, will you ask nonprofits to increase their pilots? And so everyone knows, pilot stands for payments in lieu of taxes. Nonprofits traditionally don't pay taxes. They have a pilot program with the municipality that they're in.
I know King's, Wilkes, and Blue Cross are our biggest pilots, and I believe King's is $62,000 a year, which has been for the probably past 10, 12 years. Since that day, they actually purchased a lot of property. Wilkes purchased a lot of properties. I don't feel that they're keeping up with the pilot they should have. Yes, I would definitely ask for more money.
Okay, Mr. Sorick.
I concur. I think that requesting more money from nonprofits is definitely a must, but taking that a step further, I would petition Harrisburg to look at the laws that allow for nonprofit status in the state and tax-exempt properties and say any institution such as a university that can pay its executive officers what some of these institutions pay. And you know, knowing right well where I'm sitting, I say if they can afford to pay their executive officers what they pay, they can certainly afford the same property taxes that you and I pay.
On that, Mr. Sorick, how do you view the city's relationship with Luzerne County? Specifically, are there any benefits to fostering a closer relationship between city and county government? And if so, how would you do that specifically?
I think that the city and county do have a good working relationship, and I look to maintain that. There's a lot of joint projects between the city and county, and that's something that's very important when we look at what was done with the Riverfront project and other projects. So having a good working relationship, I have a great working relationship with many on county council, and I don't see that changing.
Okay, Mr. George?
I believe the relationship could go a lot further. We have the Division Street Bridge that's been like that since 2008. We have the bridge on Washington Street also that's been blocked since 2010. And I think with the county should have done more to open those roads up. And I remember when we worked with the three solicitors, not solicitors, the commissioners, and we had a lot better working relationship. And I said we have to do that again with the council, and we don't have that right now.
Mr. George, do you believe that city government plays a role in job creation? And if you do, what specifically would you do to create jobs?
Most definitely. First, we have to make the city safe. Without a safe city, you're not going to have any economic development in the city. People are afraid to come to the city. Businesses are not going to come to the city because they rely on the people that purchase from them. Without a clean city, I mean both law and clean streets, lines in the streets, new sidewalks, new curbs. Without that, no business is going to come to the city.
Mr. Sorick?
I also agree with my opponent that restoring law and order is definitely a must when it comes to attracting new businesses here. But the city, in my opinion, could be much more business friendly. I mean, just recently the administration went on to inspecting businesses the same way they inspect rental properties, and I believe that that's a problem in itself. Wilkes-Barre doesn't seem very business friendly. It doesn't seem welcoming to those who want to come here and set up shop, and that's something that we definitely need to work on.
How specifically, though, would you foster a more business-friendly environment within the city?
Exactly as stated, these inspections for businesses, I think just create a hostile environment, as well as the way the city or should say doesn't allow contractors who are licensed by the state of Pennsylvania to conduct business in Wilkes-Barre unless you have a specific Wilkes-Barre city license. We need to have a more open door policy so that those who want to come here and conduct business can. And more importantly for our homeowners, if we have a contractor who's licensed by the state of Pennsylvania and is complying with all of the laws of the state of Pennsylvania but can't do business here, that limits the pool in which we can hire from. So right away, we're basically saying, hey, it's a members only club in Wilkes-Barre, and I'm sorry, your contractor's not a member. That's got to end.
Okay, so you view it more as an inspection and kind of onerous city government being hostile toward business, whereas your opponent sees it.
Not very welcoming.
Okay, and Mr. George, just make sure I understand, you're saying that it's more of a lack of cleanliness and there's a crime problem, and that's the biggest deterrent of business coming to Wilkes-Barre?
It's perception. What people perceive is what they believe is happening, and it appears that Wilkes-Barre is a dirty city, and we have to change that perception.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Sorick. This is my time a little bit here. How do you propose, if at all, the city collaborate more closely with, say, the Chamber of Commerce or the Diamond City Partnership? Is there a role in your administration, should you win, for that kind of collaboration?
Absolutely. There's a lot that the Chamber of Commerce has to offer, and their job is selling Wilkes-Barre as the place to be. And whether or not, they want, I don't know how to phrase it, but whether or not they believe it or not, I mean, their job is to sell Wilkes-Barre as the place to be, and our job in city government is to make Wilkes-Barre a welcoming city and a safe city in which to do business.
Mr. George?
The chamber already has a great relationship with Mayor Leighton, and they did a lot of things for the downtown, and I plan to maintain that relationship that the mayor has created.
Kind of the next step in that question, this is for both of you also, and we'll start with you, Mr. George. Do you have suggestions on what either the chamber could be doing or the Diamond City Partnership could or should be doing to make Wilkes-Barre a better place for both citizens and businesses alike?
Their function is to bring businesses to downtown. They could do better on attracting new businesses to downtown. I mean, viable businesses, businesses that pay salaries, that are able to meet the cost of living. And I don't think they're doing that. But I think with promoting the city after it's clean, it could be because the city appears dirty. Once the city has the law and order back in effect, I believe business would come in, and that's when the chambers can do all their work.
Okay, Mr. Sorick, any specific suggestions for either the Diamond City Partnership or chamber and how they can be doing a better job to make Wilkes-Barre a better place to live and work and play?
Pretty much the same thing. Selling Wilkes-Barre as, you know, a place that you want to set up business and attracting jobs here that will be family sustaining. I mean, we've done a lot with the downtown, and we, as the mayor points out, we have an 18-hour downtown. And while that's great for the college kids and that, what does that actually do for the communities? As Mr. George is great at pointing out, I mean, we need to restore law and order, and sure, but what I like to point out is that that's not always the case. You know, and I wonder if what Mr. George is referring to, the law and order that he's talking about, is it quite possibly the same law and order that was handed down by criminals Mr. George deemed as fair in his letter of support for Mark Chivarella as the Kids for Cash scandal was unfolding? I mean, this is not the type of environment that we want to have. We want to have a positive outlook for Wilkes-Barre.
Mr. George, I'll give you the opportunity to reply to that.
Okay, I did support Judge Chivarelli for what he did for Wilkes-Barre Area Career and Technical Center. When kids came to him, he said, if you violate what he says, you'll be in front of me. And that's exactly what he did. I had no problems with him with the school because he cleaned up that school and made it a safe environment for the other students in that school.
Okay, leave it at that, Mr. George. Well, Public Square looks a lot nicer than it did a few years ago. There are still a lot of vacant storefronts downtown. What's your vision for dealing with those vacant parcels, and what's your overall plan for improving downtown Wilkes-Barre?
As I stated earlier, you're not going to have any economic development in the city unless people feel safe. Right now, they don't feel safe. Once you start that, that's the building block. You make the city safe, you'll see people coming in, you'll see businesses coming in. But that's not going to happen until we have law and order in the city.
To follow up on that, though, you know, one could argue that the really recent violent crime spree that we've seen in Wilkes-Barre the last couple of years, that's not necessarily at the same timing as the vacancies downtown. There were vacancies that predate, for example, the homicide spree from 2 years ago. Do you still see that as an exact correlation?
People were still afraid to come downtown 3 years ago, 4 years ago. That downtown hasn't been vibrant for probably about 16, 17 years.
Okay. Mr. Sorick?
I think what we can do in order to fill those storefronts is offer incentives to be here in Wilkes-Barre. We can stop taxing our businesses to death in the same way we're taxing our homeowners. We need to have a leaner form of government that's not, you know, such a burden or cumbersome for the businesses to set up here. And like I said before, Wilkes-Barre does not seem very business friendly or business welcoming. We need to do more to attract them.
What kind of incentives do you envision, for example, for businesses that would want to come downtown, and where that money come from to pay for the incentives, assuming there's financial incentives that you're talking about?
Well, I'm talking about any incentives. I mean, right now, Wilkes-Barre has a 3% income tax rate, and I know that's one of the reasons we're looking at a stagnant economy in Wilkes-Barre. And you know, how will we pay for that is quite simply, as I've stated before, when we cut out corruption, when we cut out the pay-to-play environment, and we spend money responsibly, we're certainly not going to be looking at a $55 million budget. And that's, you know, all of this, everybody always says, well, you know, gee, it's always the same contractors getting the same work. And we wonder why that is, because they're bribing the politicians. And how can they afford to bribe the politicians? quite frankly, it's built into the cost of doing business in the city, and that's what we need to change.
Do you see, and this is a question for you and then also Mr. George, tying into that, do you see the problem with vacant houses being tied in the same kind of way that we have vacant storefronts? There's neighborhoods in some cases with dozens, if not hundreds of vacant homes. How do you view that, and how do you intend on helping to resolve that? That's to Mr. Sorick and then to you.
Okay.
It's kind of a follow-up to the last question.
Blight is a growing epidemic, not just here in Wilkes-Barre, but across the country. And as I've been stating all along, we need to do more to fight blight. And what Hazleton has done, we could look to our neighboring cities and say, what's working there, and bring it here. And we have to have an overall plan to fight blight. As I stated at City Council at their last meeting, our comprehensive plan, which allows us federal funding to fight blight, our comprehensive plan hasn't been updated since 1968. We're a little out of date there. We need to focus on our redevelopment authority, our ability to attract blight funding so that we can rehab some of these homes and get them back on the tax rolls and back in the hands of people. Ignoring the problem isn't getting it done. I moved to this city in 2001, and I keep saying you would be hard-pressed to find abandoned, blighted homes today. They're on every block in every street corner. So we have to do more to combat this problem. I ask everyone, please go home tonight and Google the broken window theory if you've never heard of it. It's what Rudy Giuliani did in New York City, and it's what's happening here, it's what's happening across the country. As we tax people right out of their homes, they're leaving, so what do? We keep stacking tax on top of tax because, quite frankly, as our tax base has shrunk here in Wilkes-Barre, we haven't seen government stop spending. In fact, the budget keeps going up and up and up, although our population is declining. So, we have nowhere to go but up. We need to broaden the tax base, not keep jacking it up.
Mr. George.
As Mr. Sorick said, the broken window theory was instituted under Chief Barrett and Mayor McGordy and myself when the mayor was there. We had the neighborhood impact team. We went from house to house, especially with code violations. We condemned the houses. And after so long, if they're abandoned for so long, we went in using OCD money and demolished the houses. And actually, we built new houses under another plan from OCD, and we sold them to middle-income families. And I said, that works. Why reinvent the wheel? We'll do the same thing.
Okay. Mr. Sorick, several residents have complained that City Hall's payroll is too large. Do you agree with that assessment, and how would you plan to evaluate city employees to make sure that taxpayers are getting their money's worth?
Let me just point out that the city is unionized. So as far as adjusting the payroll of unionized employees, that's not within Mayor Leighton's ability, that's not within my ability, that's not within council's ability. So what we can control is the administrative non-unionized payroll, and that's something that I've stated I think is too high. When we look to our neighboring city of Scranton, and we say, they're a city with almost twice the size, twice the population, and their payroll, their administration payroll has always been less than Wilkes-Barre. What's wrong with this picture? We need to adjust that. That's what I stated from day one. And on day one of my administration, I can cut $250,000 off of that payroll alone in benefits and divert that back to public service, public safety.
And as far as the evaluation part of that goes, do you have any idea for, even in the case of perhaps non-union employees, how would you evaluate your administration, your management team to see how well or not they're doing?
Again, look to our neighboring cities, what's working for them, and see if we can implement that here. If Scranton's mayor, again, is making $65,000, why can't ours? Okay. I don't think it's much different with any of the other positions as well. City administrator or department heads, management team. I think, again, what's working in our neighboring cities can work here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can just look at those examples and kind of lead by example.
Okay, Mr. George, same questions. Do you believe that City Hall is overstaffed, and how would you evaluate your team to make sure they're providing taxpayers with a good value?
No, I don't believe they're overstaffed. 90% of the budget is a fixed budget. That's for salary, benefits, and equipment. And you're not going to change that. You have 10% you can work with, and it's not going to be with your employees. And what I would do is, everybody's going to have to work harder with less things, and they have to be accountable for their job. Right now, if you're not accountable, you should be disciplined. And that's a big thing with the police department. Everybody on that department was accountable. And if they weren't, they were brought in front of the chief. And that's how the whole city should be run. If you're not doing what you're supposed to do, we'll find somebody else to do it.
Okay. This question you've both touched on through your answers, but I want to be very specific here. Mr. George, you get the first pass at it. What would you do to make Wilkes-Barre a safer city?
I'd have saturation patrols, which I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. We had all this back when I was chief. We had saturation patrols, we had the bike patrol, we had the crime prevention, which was big because most of your information comes from the people on the streets, and they're the crime prevention people. And right now, there's not much cooperation between the city and the crime prevention. We had cop hotspots, where if there's a problem house in an area, we didn't come back to the station to do the report. That cruiser had to stop in front of that house. If it took an hour, he stayed in front of that house and did that report. In that hour, people wouldn't come into the house. And that stuff like that works, and it doesn't cost anything. And that's what I plan on returning.
Okay, Mr. Sorick.
A lot of what I've stated all along in combating crime is not just simply adding more officers. I know that that's a staple of my campaign, but that in itself isn't enough. What we need to do is take a proactive, not reactive approach. And you know, when we look at some of this, as I've pointed out, you know, fight and blight, I've talked about revamping the Hawkeye system to be more efficient, more user-friendly, more interactive, other technologies that can be used. Police lapel cameras, that's something that's being used in many major cities. They're very inexpensive. They save the taxpayers money. I mean, how often have we heard stories of police brutality? I don't truly think that way of any of our officers, but there are some people out there who might file false claims against the city. I mean, this city settles a lot of claims similar to those, and if we have lapel cameras, very inexpensive, what they can do is just take the guesswork out of it. You know, if someone's falsely accusing one of our officers, just replay the footage and that ends that. And it's for my opponent talking about what he'll do. As chief of police, he let the staffing numbers drop to 65. We know right now, you know, 65 certainly isn't enough. We need to be up near around 90 police officers.
Just, Mr. George, out of curiosity, do you care to respond to that? What do you think the right number?
I would have loved to have about 200 officers, but I don't make that decision. That's the mayor's decision. He doesn't know how the form of government works, I guess.
Is there a number that you have in your head, though? I mean, he said 90.
We're at 86 now. If people can afford more, I'd hire 100 more. Okay. We have to limit ourselves to what the taxpayers can afford.
Dovetailing with crime is the issue of cleanliness. So, Mr. Sorick, what would you do to make Wilkes-Barre cleaner?
There's a lot we can do to make the city cleaner. As I talk about technology that we'll use, Detroit rolled out a smartphone app that allows residents to take a photo on their smartphone and send that into the city, and it would be automatically routed for resolution. Let's say you see a pothole, or you see a blighted property, or you see, as some folks like to point out at council, indoor furniture out on the porches. And when we see stuff like this, it can be dealt with immediately. You can institute something like that. It's very inexpensive, doesn't cost anything. Detroit is having great success with that. Also, organize volunteer cleanup days. If we have a city government that's, again, proactive and not reactive, I think citizens will look at this as a positive thing, and I think they'll get involved. Reinstituting the spring cleanup. I know the mayor eliminated that, stating it was too costly, but look at what we've seen since that program has ended. We've seen increased dumping in alleyways. If we don't offer a service that people need, they're going to find it elsewhere, and that's something the city cannot afford to continue.
Mr. George.
I plan to bring back the clutter cleanup and the white goods pickup to stop the alleys from being loaded. But this phone app is good if you have a smartphone and you just stop driving and stop, get out of your car and take a picture. But my proposal would be the garbage trucks go to every house in every part of the city. They can make notes of where there's potholes, where there's garbage screwed in the yards, and bring that back to the the city, and then the city can take care of it that way. And it doesn't cost anything because they're on the street already.
May I respond to that?
Okay.
As we've pointed out, and our DPW is as understaffed as any other department, let's throw more at them when our citizens will gladly volunteer to help take a photo or respond via an app. It's working in Detroit. Detroit is a much bigger, more congested city, and if it can happen there, I assure you folks, it can happen here.
Do you see it though as an onerous task for DPW employees to report?
Stop and
potholes?
fill out a form, and you know, I mean, they're picking up trash already. Let's have them stop and note which address they're looking at, what needs what. I mean, let's just do more on guys who just barely can get it done with the resources they have now.
Mr. George, care to respond to that?
The driver sitting in the truck, he can make a note of it.
Well, at least I'm heartened that you both have brought up potholes. So, Mr. George, several cities have created a violent crime unit with a highly supervised and experienced supervisor at the helm with significant expertise in fighting specifically drug crimes. Do you support the creation of a violent crime unit, and if so, how would you fund it?
Yes, I do, and I wouldn't try to fund it on our own. I team up with the county, do it as a county level, and have the county and state fund the bill. And they'd be more than willing to do that, because it's done in other places.
Mr. Sorick?
I also agree that, yes, we definitely need a violent crimes unit. I've stated in several press releases that we do. There are several grants available as well as state and local grants. There are federal grants for funding such a program, and I would look to those as well.
So you both support the creation of the unit, but you both look outside the city to fund it? Is that right?
Yes.
We would look, well, I think Mr. George and I would both agree that we would look for any available aid. It's not that we're looking outside the city, we're looking for any aid the city could get to help us in funding that.
Okay. Mr. Sorick, you accused Luzerne County District Attorney Stefanie Salavantis of improperly using public resources for her administration. Can you clarify those accusations?
I made no such accusation. What I stated in my request to District Attorney Salavantis is for her to forward the complaints that the Wilkes-Barre City Taxpayers Association had received to the Attorney General's office for investigation, because I don't think that her office should be tasked with investigating their chief officer. So I did request that her office recuse themselves and move the investigation down to the Attorney General's office for someone to take a look at. And again, I spoke with witnesses on this. Information was provided through Right to Know. Emails were sent out, and a lot of people made allegations. I'm not one of the people that made the allegations. I'm one of the people that said, hey, let's look at this and see if there's something there.
Okay. Mr. George, care to comment on that?
No.
Okay. Next question does go to you, though, so I hope you care to comment on this. Do you support an anti-discrimination measure for the city similar to what Pittston and Scranton have?
I believe the city doesn't discriminate at all. And there's no problem having an anti-discrimination policy.
Okay. Mr. Sorick?
I wholeheartedly believe we need an anti-discrimination policy. I mean, the number of minorities employed by our city are not very much. I mean, that in itself is concerning to me. Also, what we've seen in the headlines in both city newspapers tell me we have a problem, and we definitely need to address it.
Okay. Mr. George, the Irem Temple has been in a state of disrepair for about 10 years, and it's probably hanging away at the Sterling if nothing happens. There are reports that King's College is looking to purchase the building. We work with them to ensure the building is properly preserved and eventually put on the registrar of historic places.
I'll work with anyone who wants to restore the Irem Temple.
Okay. Mr. Sorick?
I echo those remarks. I think the Irem Temple is part of our history, and I think Wilkes-Barre has lost too much history as it is. We cannot afford to lose any more.
A follow-up to that. So what is your vision for that parcel? The Irem Temple specifically. You know, if you could, you know, as mayor, with the influence that you would exert as mayor, you know, what would your vision be?
My vision would be very expensive, and the city certainly doesn't have funding to do that. But you know, if King's College or someone else offers a vision, I'm very optimistic in taking a look at it, simply because, again, it's part of the history. I would love to see it in offering something back to the community, whether it be a community theater program or something. I mean, just allowing it to fall like the Sterling is unacceptable.
Mr. George?
Well, I agree with that. I'd love to see it. A museum or an art exhibit would be perfect. I know Kings has some great ideas for it, but you know, I'm not at liberty to say.
If Kings or someone else doesn't follow through and end up purchasing the building, would you support the city purchasing it?
No.
Mr. Sorick?
I would support the city getting ownership of the building simply because that way we could attract a developer and the city would be in the driver's seat. Allowing it, again, to fall away or to fall into the hands of a nonprofit such as CityVest that, I don't know, might apply for grants, then loot those grants and never follow through as we've seen, yeah, that's unacceptable to me. So getting it in the hands of the city as a last resort, absolutely, I would support that.
Sure. I'd rather see it in the hands of the chamber, which is it now, who has the resources to sell it and send it out for you know, development.
Mr. Sorick, do you want to comment again on that? Or?
No, I think that putting it in the hands of the chamber versus the city certainly would be a much more a better idea. But as I stated, you know, getting it in the hands of the city as a last resort to preserve the building, absolutely, I would support that.
Okay. And to just kind of bring things full circle here, this is more of a marketing question than it is any kind of specific question regarding cleanliness of the city or crime of the city. What would you do to elevate the city's profile? So, you know, right now, when you mention Wilkes-Barre to folks outside the area, the first thing that unfortunately comes to mind for many of them is just the violent crime spree. So what would you do if you were mayor to elevate the city's profile from a marketing standpoint?
Well, that was to me first.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Again, you know, combating crime is the #1 priority. Fighting blight, the #2 priority. We have to get those things done, and that in itself will raise the city's stature in the public eye. And right now, the reason people look at Wilkes-Barre and they fear coming down here is the high crime areas. You know, once we are able to do that, we are able to get a grasp on it, I believe public perception will change. Another thing that we look at when we hear Wilkes-Barre is that place is as corrupt as any place. In fact, some would argue it's the birthplace. I mean, Kids for Cash filmed right here in our hometown. You know, how do we avoid this? We need to change this whole perception of what Wilkes-Barre stands for. Because when I hear people talk about our city in a negative light, I'm disheartened. I live here, I work here, my business is here. And you know, in my business, I'm a real estate agent. So when I'm selling someone a home and they say to me, I can afford a $50,000 mortgage, immediately I know of about 10 places in my neighborhood to put them. And the first thing they say to me is, I'd rather in Nanticoke or Kingston or somewhere else. My heart sinks every time I hear that. We need to change that.
Mr. George.
Your question was without
marketing, right?
Marketing. We're an historic city. We should promote the historic background we have, and we're not doing that. And Irem Temple is a prime example. If we could keep that, that would be a draw for people, just to see the building. It's only the one like that in the country, and we're not utilizing those things. And there's a lot of houses and buildings in the city just like that, and we have the river. We should promote all that, and we're not doing it.
Since you both are a lot more succinct than we anticipated, I have a couple more questions that we weren't originally planning to ask, but we were asked some questions of folks here as they walked in, so I'm going to take the time to ask them now. Mr. Sorick, for you first. I'm sorry, Mr. George, rather, it's your turn. How do you want to be remembered? Say you're mayor, when your term is over, and say your last re-election term is over. How do you want to be remembered as mayor?
Honest and hardworking.
Once again, succinct. Mr. Sorick?
How about the mayor that ended corruption in the city of Wilkes-Barre? I know some might think that that's a pipe dream, but it's going to happen.
Okay. And you've touched on this a little bit, but what would be your plan to generate more, if not raising taxes, you know, how do you generate more revenue for the city?
We need to spread the revenue stream. I mean, right now, as we talk about raising taxes, that's stacking it higher. If we can take these blighted properties, fix them up, rehab them, get good families to move here and set up shop here in the city, that broadens the tax base. It increases the tax revenue by moving it outward, not upward.
Okay. And I was asked this question too by someone who walked in. It's a great question, Mr. Sorick. You could answer this one first. What, as the new mayor of Wilkes-Barre, would be your first and most important act once you're in office?
my first and most important act would be, I'm going to read this one directly from my website, is appointing a police chief who knows exactly what it means to protect and serve, and will do everything and anything necessary to protect the people of our city and make us safe again. Because without that, that to me is the biggest problem, is the crime that's going on in this city.
Mr. George.
I've been with the city for over 30 years. I know how it works. I know the police department, I know the fire department, I know the public works, I know the city hall, I know the OCD, housing. They're all hardworking people. What we have to do is to change our strategy, and I don't think you have to really change everybody to change the strategy. As long as they do what they're supposed to do, we can change that and bring law and order back to the city.
You both have answered questions about payroll at city government. How about talent? What would you do, Mr. George, get the first stab at this, what would you do to recruit high-level talent to Wilkes-Barre? How important is it to bring in folks who maybe don't have the pedigree of being a Wilkes-Barre resident, to bring in new and fresh ideas to help solve the city's problems?
See, I think we could do that without even paying them. We have Kings, we have Wilkes on north and south of Public Square. They have the bright minds. They're all willing and able to do what they can. We just start internship programs with both schools, put them in every department, and learn from them. We wouldn't even have to hire anybody. And if they're good, we keep them, and then we pay them.
Mr. Sorick?
On that one, I think we are a city of 40,000. I believe there's a lot of talent, untapped talent, right here in the city. It seems to me, and maybe it's because I look at this as an outsider's perspective at points, but it seems to me we're always hiring from the same families. It doesn't seem like we actually broaden our search beyond a handful of families in the city, and those are the people that we look to for everything. And I think in a city of 40,000, we have a lot to offer. Definitely going to the colleges and trying to attract some of that talent to stay here. Folks from around the country are utilizing our colleges, and they're sending their children here to learn. If we can attract them to stay, we're certainly going to create a positive environment for the city.
Okay. There are many who believe that the mayor's relationship with city council can quite honestly make or break the success of that administration. So what would you do to foster a close working relationship and a positive working relationship with council members?
I think treating everybody fairly with respect is first and foremost. I don't see a problem working with any council members. I think most people in the city who serve on council get involved for the same reasons. They truly want to make a positive impact on their community, and I think that as long as we're all looking and working toward that objective, we'll do fine working together.
Mr. George.
Great minds don't think alike. You have to compromise on what they believe and what you believe. It can't be a one-man show. Those days are over. There has to be a cooperation between all of council and the mayor.
Okay. And this brings us to our last question. You both have an equal amount of time to answer it. Mr. George, actually, you get to answer this one. Why should you be mayor?
Like I said, I've been with the city for 30 years. I know how it functions. I know every department. I worked with every department as chief, as deputy chief, as patrolman. From day one, I could get the ball and run with it. I don't have to take a year to see how everything works. It's all there, and I have my plans. And I know what Mayor Leighton did, Mayor McLaughlin did, Mayor Lisman did. They all had great ideas. Just got to incorporate them and put them all together and run with the ball.
Mr. Sorick.
I've been following city government for quite some time. I believe I can also hit the ground running. I believe that I should be mayor for several simple reasons. Number one, I'm not politically connected. I'm an average citizen who wants the best for our community. I look at some of what's going on, and again, it's heartbreaking. Also, I have not taken campaign contributions from any city contractors looking to be rewarded once elected. My campaign has never once taken any money from anyone who's been convicted of political corruption. I'm the only candidate up here who can say that. So quite frankly, I'm asking for the vote simply because I'm the honest choice.
I'll give you both the opportunity to respond to each other's closing remarks, Mr. George.
I was brought up, when I give something, don't expect anything in return. And that's how I act. I don't care if somebody gave me $5 or $5,000. All they're gonna get from me is a thank you, because I owe nobody anything.
Mr. Sorick.
Because we've seen how well that's worked in the past, folks. We should believe that. Thank you.
All right, at this point, I'd like to thank both candidates for their time. I want to thank all of you for coming. And with that said, thank you again.